The observation deck stank of recycled anxiety and overpriced muck. 63 species had gathered to watch 9 candidates have a go at the impossible, which was really just another way of saying they'd forked out good money to watch people die in creative ways. Car 9 rotated below them, a marble of greens and purples that would have been lovely if you ignored the part where everything on it wanted to kill you. Category X, Deathworld, the collective's gold standard for separating proper survival specialists from enthusiastic corpses. Candidate 7V is approaching the drop zone, announced the proctor, a suit named Fletcher, whose voice had all the emotional range of a dodgy translator. Human designation, 3rd attempt by this species. A Draxi administrator clicked its mandibles. Could have been amusement, could have been indigestion. The last 2 triggered emergency extraction within 4 minutes. One of them did it before she'd even landed, added a core observer, its 3 eyes blinking one after the other. The viewing screens flickered to life, each showing a candidate's helmet cam feed. 8 of them hit the ground running, which was clever. The jungle canopy of Car 9 gave a bit of cover from the acid rain that chucked it down every 17 minutes. The undergrowth was lethal, sure, but at least it killed you slowly. Candidate 7V touched down in a clearing, then she just stood there. Vitals? Fletcher asked. Heart rate's up, but she's stable. No panic markers. Breathing's normal. Check her kit for faults. A technician fiddled with some holographic controls. All systems are go. Beacon's working. She's getting all the data feeds on environmental hazards. On screen, the human tilted her head up. Acid rain began to fall, each drop sizzling on her suit's outer coating. The coating would hold for maybe 20 minutes before it started to degrade. Standard procedure was to find shelter, sharpish. She opened her pack instead. What on earth is she doing? The Draxi leaned forward, mandibles twitching. The human pulled out a collapsed frame, polymer struts, a roll of treated fabric. She got to work with the efficiency of someone putting together flat-pack furniture, which was worrying because nobody practiced building things on death worlds. Is that? The core observer paused. Is that a tent? Negative, the technician reported. Structural analysis suggests it's for commercial use. It's got a counter and a cover that sticks out to keep the weather off. Fletcher's translator crackled with what might have been confusion. Candidates are given emergency shelters in their standard packs. Why is she lugging about extra architecture? Nobody answered because the human had moved on to phase 2 of whatever bonkers plan this was. She'd pulled out a small kettle, also not standard issue, and was setting it up with a casual competence that made the observation deck go dead quiet. She's brought a kettle, someone whispered. Check the weight of her gear, Fletcher ordered. This is against the mass restrictions. The technician worked quickly. Negative. She's right on the limit. All non-standard kit was approved during the intake inspection, classified as personal effects and survival tools. Tools for what exactly? On screen, the human had finished her little construction project. It was a stand about 2 meters wide, 1.5 high, with a slanted roof to send the rain packing. She'd put it up against a rock formation that gave some wind protection and a clear line of sight from 3 different directions. Tactically sound, actually. Then she hung the sign, hand-painted on actual fabric in letters big enough to read from the observation deck's fancy feeds. T, 2 quid. The silence in the observation room became so dense you could have cut it with a knife. I do apologize, the Draxi said slowly. My translator must be on the fritz. Did that sign say tea? Fletcher confirmed. A human beverage, mildly stimulant, culturally significant. She's opened a proper little calf. That does appear to be the situation, yes. The core's 3 eyes had stopped blinking in sequence and were now all staring at the same spot, which is apparently what happened when their species saw something that completely shattered their grasp on reality. The test is to survive for 1 hour on a planet where the rain is corrosive, the plants are carnivorous, and the local predators hunt in packs. She set up a business. A younger observer, some species no one ever bothered to remember, raised a tentacle. Is that even allowed? Fletcher was now swiping through his data screens with growing desperation. The rules state candidates must survive on the surface for 1 hour using the provided equipment and any resources they can gather. They may not receive outside help. They may not harm other candidates. They must stay in the designated test zone. Not a sausage about commerce. Why would there be rules about commerce? Who opens a tea stand on a death world? The human, apparently. She was now using a mortar and pestle on something she'd picked from a nearby bush. The bush in question was a level 4 hazard, with seed pods that caused respiratory paralysis in most species. She was making tea out of poison. I move to disqualify her for taking the mickey, the Draxi announced. On what grounds? The Corps countered. She's not breaking any protocols. She's breaking common sense. Common sense isn't in the regulations. Fletcher held up a thin limb for silence. The human is showing a non-standard survival methodology. However, she hasn't broken any explicit rules. We'll keep observing. She's going to die, the Draxi muttered. Probably, Fletcher agreed, but how she dies might be useful for developing future protocols. On screen, the human had managed to brew something that was steaming in the humid air. She poured it into a mug, also not standard issue, and took a long sip. Her vitals showed a slight drop in stress hormones. She sat down on a folding chair she'd also brought, propped her feet on a rock, and waited. 3 minutes passed, then 5. The acid rain stopped. A pack of 6-legged predators prowled past her clearing, close enough for the deck's sensors to pick up their heat signatures. They didn't go near the stand. Why aren't they attacking? The young observer asked. The technician checked the data. Don't know. Atmospheric analysis near her position shows high alkaline compounds. She's venting something from her kettle. It's making a scent barrier. She's using her kettle as a chemical weapon. More like marking her territory. The predators reckon her area is occupied by something that smells wrong. They're giving it a wide berth. The Draxi made a sound like grinding gravel. This is the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. It's working, though, the Corps observed. Candidate 3R appeared on another screen, running for his life from something large and angry. Candidate 6K had hit their emergency beacon after stepping in acidic mud. Candidate 1A was hyperventilating in a cave, panic markers going through the roof. Candidate 7V took another sip of her poison tea and fiddled with her sign so it caught the light better. 42 minutes left on the clock. The observation deck settled in to watch because, at this point, no one had a clue what was going to happen next, which was exactly the sort of uncertainty that made humans either the most dangerous species in the collective or the most entertaining. Sometimes both. By minute 37, the human had 4 customers and a seating arrangement that would have made a town planner weep. The Threxian had bagged the premium spot behind the counter, closest to the warmth of the kettle. A Fenori had claimed a rock that gave it a good vantage point. 2 Crash sat back-to-back near the edge of the clearing, their exoskeletons clicking nervously as they scanned for threats. All of them were holding mugs. It's a calf, the young observer said, his voice hollow. She's running a calf on car 9. The human was explaining her refill policy when the Fenori, a species known for being overly cautious, spoke up. Your lot are new to collective space. 3 years, is it? Thereabouts, the human said, measuring out leaves without looking up, her hands moving in a practiced routine. We've heard all sorts of stories. The Fenori's ears swiveled independently, taking in multiple audio feeds. Conflicting reports. Some say humans are resilient, others say you're reckless. The intelligence agencies can't decide if you're a threat or just a right pain. Probably both. She poured hot water, watched it darken. Depends on the day. One of the Crash chittered, its translator spitting out, I was told humans evolved on a death world, that you lot find danger a bit of a hobby. We've got public footpaths, the human said. Some of them will kill you, sure, but mostly we just moan about the weather and argue about food. And yet you're here, selling tea in a place designed to see if candidates have what it takes for deep space jobs. Needed the cert for a job. The observation deck had gone quiet in that special way that happens when a room full of beings realize they've been barking up the completely wrong tree. What job needs a cert from the Car 9 trial? Fletcher pulled up her file. Her application says station services, food prep. She's a cook. The Draxi's mandibles had frozen mid-click. Beverage specialist, previous employment at, Fletcher paused, Outpost Station Narid 7. Contract 4 years, reason for leaving, station decommissioned after environmental cascade failure. What sort of failure? Catastrophic atmosphere breach, reactor instability, and a plague of tunnel worms, all at once. Station was evacuated over 6 hours during an active crisis. The Corps' middle eye focused on the human, who was now explaining to the Fenori why you shouldn't down your tea too quickly in stressful situations. She lived through that, and her response was to get a job that required Car 9 certification. The new job's on a mining platform in the Kellis Expanse. Apparently, they've got strict requirements after losing 3 contractors to preventable accidents. On screen, the human had finished her explanation and was now fielding questions about humanity in general, which was apparently easier than talking about her own history. "Do your people really drink ethanol for fun?" the Threxian asked. "Some do. I stick to caffeine, caper, and you can still operate heavy machinery. I was told humans fight each other for entertainment. We call it sport. It's very organized, mostly non-lethal, mostly. There's paperwork for the other kind." The Fenori's ears had stopped swiveling and were locked forward. Total focus. "Why did you build this stand instead of hiding?" The human paused, mug halfway to her lips. Outside the clearing, something screamed and then went quiet. Nobody at the stand even flinched. "Because hiding is just a slower kind of panic," she said finally. "You crouch in a cave, every sound is a countdown. Every shadow is something with teeth. Your own brain invents threats faster than the planet can." She gestured at her setup. This is a to-do list. Get ingredients, purify water, keep it hot, serve customers. My hands are busy, so my brain doesn't have time to catastrophize. She refilled the Threxian's mug. "Plus, if I'm going to die somewhere, I might as well die doing something I'm good at." "You're good at staying calm when surrounded by lethal organisms." "I'm good at making tea when everything's on fire. The organisms are just set dressing." One of the crash made a sound that didn't translate properly but screamed, "Existential crisis. Your species is broken." "Cheers. I'll take that as a compliment." "That wasn't an insult. I mean your threat. Assessment protocols are fundamentally knackered." "I know what you meant." The second crash leaned forward. "I've studied xenopsychology. Most species develop survival instincts that say, danger equals run away. Humans seem to have developed danger equals challenge. It's pathological." "It's just another Tuesday," the human corrected. "Want to know the real difference? You lot all trained for this, studied the stats, memorized the threat lists, practiced the emergency drills. You came here prepared to survive." She looked at each of them in turn. "I came here prepared to work a shift, and I've worked shifts where the station's on fire, where the life support is failing, where customers are having meltdowns in real time. This," she gestured at the jungle, the acid rain starting up again, the distant sound of something dying horribly. "This is just another workplace with difficult conditions." "That's barmy," the Fenori said quietly. "Maybe. But we're all still alive, and I've made some good tips, so the barmy approach is working." The observation deck was now in the middle of a full-blown argument. Someone was proposing humanity be classified as a hazard species. Someone else was suggesting they be recruited for crisis response. A third voice was wondering if humans even knew they were supposed to be scared. Fletcher watched the timer count down. 12 minutes to go. 5 candidates still active, 4 of them currently drinking tea in a clearing that should have been a kill zone. "They're not breaking the rules," he said, mostly to himself. "They're showing us we wrote the wrong rules." The Draxi looked up from his notes. "How so?" "We designed this test to measure survival instinct under pressure. We assumed survival meant hiding, running, enduring. We never considered that for some species, survival might just mean business as usual." "Community," Fletcher corrected. "She didn't save herself. She created a space where a bunch of them could save each other and charge them for the privilege. That's either brilliant or... no, it's definitely both." On screen, the human was checking her supplies, doing sums in her head to see if she had enough to last the final few minutes. The Threxian was showing the crash how to find safe drinking water. The Fenori was watching all approaches, ears swiveling like security scanners. They'd formed a working team around a tea stand. The human caught the monitoring drone's camera and gave it a little wave. Fletcher got the distinct impression she knew exactly how absurd all this was, and that she'd been banking on it. The timer hit 0. An extraction shuttle descended. The human, Poppy, started packing up her kit. "Hold on." The Fenori's ears flattened. "You're taking it all down?" "Time's up. The next lot will need the space. There won't be a next group here for 6 months." Poppy paused, kettle half collapsed in her hands. Huh, odd schedule. The shuttle landed. Medics came out, expecting trauma victims. Instead, they found 4 candidates standing around finishing their tea while a human packed up her business. In the post-trial interview, Poppy sat across from Fletcher, looking less like someone who'd survived certain death and more like someone waiting for a delayed train. "Talk me through your decision-making," Fletcher said, datapad at the ready. "Which bit?" "The bit where you opened a shop instead of using standard survival techniques." She leaned back. "I had a look at the environment, weighed up the threats, and figured running would knacker me out, hiding would make me anxious, and fighting was stupid because I'm not equipped for it. So, I did what I'm actually trained for, making tea and serving people in high-pressure places. The tea is just the vehicle." Fletcher made a note his bosses would hate. "You've done this before." "Not on deathworlds, but Nereid 7, like I said. Also worked in a canteen on a colony ship during engine failure. Served breakfast while the gravity was all over the place. 3 years on a mining station where the air filters kept breaking. You learn to just get on with it when things are bad. Panicking just makes it worse, and the customers still want their orders." The other candidates weren't customers. They were competitors. They were people having a bad day. I had resources, simple economics. You charged them. I charged them a reasonable price, given the circumstances and how hard it was to get the ingredients. There's a difference between helping and being taken for a mug. Fletcher's translator didn't quite get the tone, but he understood anyway. "Your file says you applied for a job on the Kellis 9 mining platform. Why did it require CAR 9 certification?" "The last lot of contractors kept dying. Management decided anyone working there needed to prove they could handle a dangerous environment." She glanced at the window. "Figured this would be easier than explaining Nereid 7 for the 40th time." "You thought a Category X Deathworld trial would be easier than an interview?" "Interviews are all waffle. This was cut and dried. Survive or don't. I'm better with cut and dried." There was something in her voice that suggested this wasn't about a job at all, but Fletcher had already written a report that was going to cause months of administrative headaches. He didn't need to add psychological depth to it. "You passed," he said. "All 4 candidates who used your establishment also passed. The historical pass rate for CAR 9 is 32%. Today, it was 55%. Good for them, then. The testing protocols are under review. Your methods have raised questions about whether we're measuring the right things." She stood, ready to go. "You're measuring if people can avoid dying for 60 minutes. I just made it easier for more people to not die. Sounds like it's working as intended to me." "It's not." Fletcher stopped himself. "Most species see survival as a solo effort. You turned it into a team sport. Most species didn't evolve sharing a planet with everything else that also wanted to survive. We learned to cooperate or we died out. Then we learned capitalism, which is just cooperation with money involved." She headed for the door. "Is that everything? I've got a shuttle to catch." Fletcher had about 40 more questions and no authority to keep her. "You're cleared for departure." She nodded and left, and Fletcher sat in the empty room, wondering how to explain to the board that humanity had just treated their toughest exam like a chance for a bit of a chinwag. 3 months later, a new memo did the rounds. It didn't mention the human by name, but it noted that candidates were now allowed to bring comfort items and morale maintenance equipment. It also said, in smaller text, that collaborative survival strategies would no longer get you disqualified. The stand was left on CAR 9's surface. It became a minor landmark. Survey teams used it as a waypoint. One administrator admitted they'd stopped by and found the structure still standing, the sign faded but readable. Someone had left a 2-quid chip on the counter. The collective had built CAR 9 to test who could endure fear and hostility. They'd never considered that some species came pre-broken in a way that made awful places feel familiar, that turned disasters into just another shift, that looked at a death world and saw a customer base. Poppy got her job on Kellis 9 and lasted 8 years before transferring to somewhere worse. Apparently, once you've served tea during a reactor meltdown, regular danger just felt boring. Somewhere in her HR file, a note existed. Capable of maintaining operational standards under duress. Recommend for crisis postings. Do not assign to quiet locations. Subject requires minimum chaos threshold for optimal performance, which was just a formal way of saying that humans weren't built for surviving death worlds. They were built for working on them and charging decent rates.